Hi, I'm back. And this episode is going to be a little different because it needs to be. The work that I've been doing, the people I've been working with, and what I've been learning along the way, it's all led me to a shift. A couple months back, I looked at my revenue breakdown. Nothing fancy, just me, a spreadsheet, and a sense that I needed to check in with the direction things were heading in my business. And 97% of my income came from nonprofit clients. That number stopped me, not because I was shocked, I knew who I was working with, but because it finally made something clear that had been happening under the surface for a while. While I was out there creating strategy containers, marketing frameworks for mompreneurs, the people consistently hiring me, finding me, resonating with my content, referring me, were women leading nonprofits, women who were already showing up for their communities in big ways, women carrying huge missions and vision, women who weren't new to leadership, but were often isolated in it. They were doing big work with too little support. And when I really paused to listen to what that number was telling me, it wasn't about where the money was coming from. It was about where the energy had already shifted. The work I'm doing with nonprofit leaders, it isn't side work. It's the most aligned and most powerful work I've ever done. And today I want to talk about why. Because if you've been in my world for a while, you know this all started when I was building offers between school pickups and late night bursts of energy. I know what it means to create something in the margins of your life, in those cracks. And I also know what it feels like to realize you don't want to live like that forever. There's a big difference between surviving and building a business that can grow. But there's also something you may not know about me. I have spent over 13 years in education advocacy locally before I started my business. I also have volunteered and then worked at Community Action Partnership of San Luis Obispo County. I led strategic family engagement programs for migrant Head Start families. And this was work that taught me how to keep marginalized kids and families connected to their education. I sat in on board meetings where policy decisions were made to directly impact these families who were navigating systems and not designed with them in mind. We were trained in human-centered design before that became a buzzword. We created these frameworks based on what families needed to succeed, beginning in preschool and pre-K, not what looked good on an annual report or slide deck. And that work changed how I see leadership. It taught me that true impact, it doesn't come from passion alone. It comes from combining deep community knowledge with a clear, sustainable structure. It taught me that you can care deeply about people and still run things strategically, that you can center families and still think about budgets, systems, and long-term planning. It also taught me the most loving thing you can do for the people you serve is build a nonprofit or organization that doesn't depend entirely on your energy. And I've carried that lens into every piece of strategy work that I've done since. What I'm seeing now working with nonprofit leaders one-on-one is that this sector is full of amazing mission-driven women who are working way too hard for too little return. Not just financially, though yes, that is part of it, but in terms of energy, reach, sustainability. They are stuck in reactive mode, wearing every hat, trying to keep board members happy while also showing up for staff, writing grants, running programming, handling HR, doing their own marketing, and still trying to make payroll, and then go home and be present for their family. Most of them are pulling 60-hour weeks at least, but only getting paid for maybe 30. They're making decisions based on what's urgent instead of what's strategic. They're building programs that depend entirely on them showing up, which means they can never step away. And most of them are still being told that they need to be more realistic, stop expecting too much. You're running a nonprofit. And that is what I am finished with. I've watched incredible women leaders carry $1 million visions with a $50,000 budget and zero staff support. I've seen programs with proven outcomes get shut down because the founder couldn't secure the funding beyond one big grant cycle. I've worked with women whose boards are asking them to do more with less and then blaming them when they can't make it work. But I've also seen what happens when that is flipped. When the leaders get out of reaction mode, when they pause long enough to think strategically, when they stop apologizing for wanting more, for their organizations, for their teams, and for themselves. And what I see is this pattern. This leader running a community organization, maybe it's health services, early childhood, housing, food security, and she's drowning. Her board keeps asking for more programming while cutting her budget. She's working from her kitchen table because she can't afford office space. She's doing intake, management, even some grant writing and bookkeeping, often way past midnight. And when she finally reaches out for help, she's just weeks away from shutting down. Not because the need isn't there, not because the community doesn't value the work, but because she's built this nonprofit that can only survive if she is always there and basically never sleeps. So when I come in, we rebuild that. We look at the programs and I ask, what can be done by you? What can be systematized? And what can you delegate? We map out funding strategies that don't depend on her being the one writing all the grant proposals. We create job descriptions for roles that she can hire out as soon as funding is there and ready. And we build board development plan that brings in people who support growth. Don't just show up to the meetings so that they can put that on their resume. And you know what happens? Quickly, she starts moving in a different way. She can bring on a staff member. And then a year later, she's now in charge of herself and her team. Yes, but she knows that this means taking care of her needs first, working only 40 hours a week instead of 80. The strategic approach to building sustainable impact is what I've been refining for over a decade, and it's what's driving everything I do now in nonprofit strategy work. And if you want to stay connected to this work, the frameworks I'm using, the strategies that I'm seeing work, the behind the scenes insights from working with leaders like this, I would love to have you join my Rich Nonprofit newsletter. It comes out twice a month, practical tools that you can put into practice right away. So you can sign up at the link below in the show notes. I was in Mexico earlier this summer with one of my clients and her team. We weren't at a stuffy hotel ballroom with a PowerPoint or a bunch of compliant notes. We were on a strategy retreat. We were thinking big, planning clearly, anchoring the organization's growth, and not just thinking what's urgent right now. We mapped a strategy that gave her team clarity, got her board aligned, and allowed her to think about funding not from a place of desperation, but from a place of power. And that's what I want more nonprofit leaders to have. Because if you've built a business that supports your family, you already know how to lead. You know how to create revenue. You know how to think in systems. You know how to stay in the game when things feel uncertain. You also know how to make decisions that serve your long-term vision, not just today's crisis. And that's not just business thinking, that's leadership. And that is the skill set that I believe the nonprofit world is missing. Your nonprofit is a business. You can be mission-driven, heart-centered. I want that for you, but I also want you to know that this is a business and it needs to be sustainable so that you can impact more people. We don't need more passion projects that run out of steam. We don't need more martyrs running on fumes. We need strategic, resourced, sustainable leadership. We need women who understand that serving your community well means building a nonprofit that can outlast your own capacity. We need leaders who can hold both deep care for the people you're serving and sharp, long-term strategic vision. And that is why I'm changing direction. This podcast is now the Rich Nonprofit. And look, rich isn't just about money. It's about leadership. It's about being resourced. It's about being rich in clarity, in support, in structure. It's about building organizations that can weather funding changes, transitions, community crisis. It's about creating wealth of impact that compounds over time. I am so finished with the nonprofit martyrdom complex. I've been there, I've seen it, I've brought it home. I'm also finished with doing more with less and that being treated like a virtue. And I'm also finished with these women apologizing for wanting more, for wanting to go global, for wanting to be paid well so they can support themselves and their family. If you're a woman leading a nonprofit or wanting to, you are in the right place. We are going to talk about how to lead boldly, fund sustainably, and stop shrinking your mission just because someone else is uncomfortable with you wanting more. We're also going to dig into strategic planning that works and it's authentic for your nonprofit. We're going to explore funding strategies that don't depend on you working those 80-hour weeks. And we're going to talk about building teams, managing boards, and creating systems that let your nonprofit grow. Next week's episode is about your board and how they actually don't want another strategic plan. Because let's be honest, most of them don't. But I'll tell you what they do want and how to deliver it without getting stuck in another 60-page document that nobody's going to read. You deserve more than good intentions and endless hustle. You deserve strategy that works so that you can make that huge impact on the world. I will see you next time on The Rich Nonprofit.